In this case, I'm actually going to go ahead and have it send me a text message. In your particular case, you would actually go ahead and have your token that would ask for that secure access code. So the system is now in the process of sending me that secure access code. Once I receive that, I'll enter it into it, and then it will allow me to log on and proceed. Again, in my test environment, in the process now of loading up all my different accounts, loading up my view that I have set up for me. So this, in essence, is basically my home screen. So I'm going to kind of go through and I'm going to show you a couple of different things that we can do here on that particular home screen. Some different ways we can customize it, I guess, if you will. Follow that out by kind of going through some different functions that you'll probably do in your normal day-to-day. Show you some new features in the settings component of it, as well as talking about, doing ACH payments, multiple transfers, as well as ACH files, if you will. So one of the first things you're going to notice, we have what we call account tiles out there. And these tiles really are your individual accounts. You're going to see that I show a couple of real quick information components about it. In this case, I'm showing my current balance, and I'm showing what my available balance is. And again, these are for all my different accounts that I have out here. Anytime I want to, I can actually click on these and drag these accounts. And you're going to notice what ends up happening is that basically changes the order of those that I have. So, think about if you got some accounts you always want to see up at the top, or if you want to see them in a different order. Really, it's as simple as just dragging these account tiles to wherever I want it, and it changes the particular order of that. Okay. You're going to notice as well I've got grouping. So in this case, I've got a company B grouping. You can see I've got an accounts labels grouping, which is basically my general accounts, and I've got a company C grouping as well. I'm going to walk you through and show you how to create that here real quick. Again, just going back to any one of these accounts, if I want to, I can drag on it. As soon as I drag on it, you're going to notice this little tray opens up here. If I put it in that tray, what that in essence is allowing me to do is allowing me to create a new group. And you're going to see we label it new group. I can go in and edit that. At this point, I can really call that anything I want to. So in this particular case, maybe I'm going to call this Group D. I'm getting really creative here. I just go ahead and click on the check mark to go ahead and save that. Okay. I now end up having a Group D that I've just went ahead and created. And again, I can put as many accounts into those different groups as I want to. The other thing as well, you're going to notice I can actually drag accounts in and out of groups as well. So for example, if I created account Group B, later decided I needed to put a different account in there, I can just easily go ahead and drag that, put those different accounts into that particular group. Okay. A couple other components I wanted to show you on this particular page. Over on the right, you're going to have a couple of quick links that we have. One of them is approvals. So we'll get into this, but thinking about approvals is somebody has drafted a transaction. Our policy says that I now have to go in and have somebody else go in and approve that transaction. We can get to it multiple different ways. We can get to it off of the left navigation screen, but we actually did is we went ahead and we created a quick link to that. Same way with statements. If I want to go ahead and view a statement, or if I'm in here and want to do a transfer between accounts, I can click on this quick transfer and it'll bring me up to a transfer screen. And from that transfer screen, that is then where I can go ahead and perform basically those internal type of transfers, if you will. So a couple other components we'll look at here real quick. just some of the basic navigation on those accounts, and then we'll talk a little bit about how we move from account to account as well. You'll notice there's really three things I can do for each one of those accounts. I can view the activity, which if you think about activity, that's going to really be, what transactions posted, what deposits maybe had posted. I can again go in and do that quick transfer component as well. You'll keep in mind, remember I said there's a couple of different ways that we can go about doing stuff in here. One of them would be to actually click on that account and do that quick transfer. When you click on the account, obviously the account that I clicked on is going to be included on it. If I use the shortcut, I'm going to have to enter both the from and to accounts in there as well. And then I can create an account nickname. An account nickname is really going to be by user. So, for example, if internal checking account 0082 maybe doesn't have the same meaning to me as if I wanted to name it something like payroll, or maybe it's my cash management account, or maybe it's the miscellaneous account, or maybe it's the payable dues account type of thing. So again, multiple different ways you can set that up. You can notice down here on this one, in my CK company accounts, I've got an internal CK, and I've also got a payroll. And if I go in and I click on that nickname the account, okay, you're going to see that there's two different options in there. One is there's a global nickname, and then the other one is a personal nickname. The nice thing about the global nickname is that is going to show that nickname up for whoever is in that particular role. A personal nickname would be if I wanted to show it just for my particular user, in which case, maybe it's going to be payroll CK company. Again, that will only show for me. Everybody else, it will just show as a payroll type of an account. Again, just some little customizations you can make kind of on that home screen piece of it there. I'm going to go back here and I'm going to show you the quick transfers piece of this. Okay. You're going to notice when a transfer comes up, I can do either an individual transfer or I can do a multi-account transfer. Okay. From my perspective, what we're going to do right now is we're actually going to show an individual transfer. And again, you're going to see here's a list of all of my different accounts. Okay. Keeping in mind, you can start to see where those nicknames come in handy there versus just having a bunch of different checking accounts. In my example, I have internal checking accounts. I've got a ton of different ones out there, but that payroll account obviously is much easier to see. Notice we do still keep the number or the last four numbers. Obviously, it's a masked account number, so you can still use that as reference, but obviously it's a little bit easier to actually see that name on that. So maybe I'm going to go ahead and click that payroll account, and then I'm going to do my to account. Okay, and maybe I'll do the test CK. This is where I can put in the dollar amount. So again, easy enough to fill that in. The transfer frequency, okay, this is where I can look at setting this up as a one-time, or I can actually set it up as reoccurring. So maybe we know that we've got some memberships that are due every first of the month. Maybe it's the 15th of the month. Maybe it's monthly, whatever, or weekly, whatever the case is. I can actually select these different frequencies, and what will end up happening then is that transfer will occur every time at that particular date. Again, my transfer date, all right, it could be the 8th of the month, it could be today. Obviously, the only thing I can't do is backdate it, but I can actually go ahead and future date when I want that transaction to happen. Again, I can put a short memo, and again, this memo is going to show on the internal transfer on the checking accounts, or if it's checking to savings, whatever the case is, when I transfer those particular accounts. Let's look at the multi-account transfer. Okay. On the multi-account transfer, what I can do is a couple different things here, and it's kind of a little bit unique. I can actually go ahead and I can do a search for that. And when I do a search, what it's going to do is going to actually go out there and it's going to look and see if I have created any templates. And we'll talk through a template. But think about a template as a list of multiple transfers that I want to have happen. And I know I'm going to do that transfer fairly consistently, but it may not be on the same set frequency. It may be on the same frequency or not. I'll go ahead and get that off of that screen there. Before I show you how to create a template, first off I want to show you I've got 3 templates set up here. I've got a test template, a test 2, and a test 3. You're going to notice these are starred. Basically, I mark those as favorites. The reason I mark those as favorites, I always want those to show up at the top of my list. Keeping in mind, I can create multiple templates, in which case, again, I can always do a search for them. But if I've got favorites that I know I'm going to use consistently, I can have those show up up top, if you will. From there, I go ahead and I click on the 3 little dots there. I can actually go ahead from this particular place and do a transfer funds. So if I've already got a template created, it's just as simple as going in and clicking on that transfer funds. What you're going to see it come up here is it's still going to want me to put a date when I want the transfers to happen, right? So let's say we're going to put this out there as August 8th. I can then put in a memo. And what's nice about this particular line here, whatever the memo I put, I can actually have that memo flood into all the different entries, if you will. So as soon as I click push memo to all, you're going to notice that now shows out there on every one of those. Since I am using a template, you're going to see I've already got it set up where I've got the payroll component going. It shows me what my balance is on that account to this other account called Test for Balances. It automatically sets in what the dollar amounts are. Keeping in mind, if I need to, I can go ahead and I can change those, right? But it automatically flooded those in, part of using that template, I guess, if you will. Additionally, I can go ahead and I can click Expand Row. I can change that particular memo if I've got 1 or 2 line items that I wanted to show different. It then shows me I'm doing 3 different transfers. The total dollar amount, in this case, it's $3.06. What will end up happening then, I can go ahead and hit Submit. And you're going to see that it shows the payments are being processed. Okay. While that's in the background processing, really what it's doing is making sure that I've got the security to do that for all those particular accounts. It's actually going out and making sure as well that if I've got any kind of alerts on the accounts or that the funds are available. From there, I can go ahead and basically close it. I can see that transaction was approved, or I can go into Activity Center, which will show me some more details about that particular transaction. So if I click on View in Activity Center, we'll just go ahead and do that. Okay, you're going to basically go out there and you're going to see there's my transfers that I have set up. There's what they were out there. Okay, I technically at this point, if I wanted to, could still cancel that transaction. I could, copy that transaction. And again, this is going to depend on your security rights that you have, but it's just a quick way on that Activity Center to go out and see that transaction. What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to go back to the home screen here. Okay, you'll notice we did the quick transfer, and then we clicked on multi-transfer as part of our initial testing here. What I'm going to now do is I'm going to show you a couple different ways that you can do this. Okay, I can actually go in and navigate through transactions. I can do a funds transfer. So the screen is going to look exactly the same as whether we use the link to the quick transfer or whether we go into a navigation tool. I'm going to go back into the multi-account transfers. This time what I'm going to do though, really, instead of using one of my existing templates, I'm going to show you how to create a template. Okay, one of the things I'm going to have to do is give the template a name. Again, I am not the most creative, so I'm going to call this test template. And in this case, I think I'm up to 4. If I wanted to put a memo, I could do that. And from here now, I can actually go in and I can start creating what my template's going to do. You're going to notice that it automatically is going to flood in some accounts, but as soon as I start typing, right, it's going to do a search, okay? And I can actually end up typing by the nickname, or I can type by the account number. Either way, it's going to go ahead and it's going to do a search to find that and narrow down my choices. As soon as I see my account, I can basically click on it. That's my from account. Works exactly the same way on the to account. Again, I can put in my dollar amounts, keeping in mind that I can actually change this as well, right, when I get into that template, if I know that that may be variable. Same as we looked at before, as soon as I expand the row, now I can put an individual memo on there versus doing the push to all. The system automatically defaults 3 transfers in this template. I can actually go through and I can add additional rows, if you will, and I believe it's 35 is kind of the maximum per template. I haven't had a whole lot of clients run over or request additional rows, but that's kind of where the maximum is set at. Okay, I can then go ahead and at this point I can click Save. Okay, what I can then do from here is I can actually pay directly from this template, or if I created this template ahead of time, I'm not going to use it for a while, I can just hit Close. Okay, you can now see I have a test template for, so anytime I want to come in and do a multi-account transfer, I can actually just now select that as one of my available templates. Obviously, in your environment, you'll want to be a little more descriptive in the template names than what I was, but I think that gives you kind of a good idea on how those multiple transfers work. And again, the individual transfer, I think this is fairly straightforward. It's going to basically be the kind of the exact same concept. It's just going to be one from account, one to account. Since it is one from account, one to account, no way to set up a template there. And then under transactions, you would have a stop payment if you would need to go ahead and do that. That stop payment really works. Very, very similar to probably what you're used to seeing today in your current system, just the different information that you would need to add. So for that particular one, we won't go through that piece of it, but did want to just let you know what was in there under those particular tabs. I'm going to go back out to my home screen now. Now I'm going to go under Settings, and within my Settings, I'm going to show you how we can modify some additional components here, and we're going to go under Account Preferences. Okay, you're going to notice that the account preferences, they look similar to what we had before. You're going to see I've got my group. In this case, I call my group Company B. You're going to see I've got my middle accounts that are labeled, and then you can see I've got my groups D, C, and CK accounts. From this particular tab, what I can do, though, if I click, I basically can move that group up. So when I first sign into my home page, right, potentially I want that group D to be up. So you now notice the group D is above C. I can continue to move that. Maybe I want that to be the first group that I see when I log on. So even though you may have created those groups in a different order, right, you're going to notice that I can basically keep moving those groups up so that it's going to show more towards the top of my screen. Additionally, if I got CK company accounts, I can move that group down. Just kind of a good way to go through and really have that home page set up what is going to be the most efficient and convenient for you. What's going to happen now is if I go back out to my home screen, okay, you're going to now see that my group D is my second group that's displayed. I still left Company B out at the top there. Again, going back to Settings, going back to Account Preferences, that's where I can really go in, modify, and change those particular components with that. I can additionally on this as well, I can go into an individual account. So if I go ahead and I click on that account, okay, you're going to notice just like I did on the home screen where I drug the tiles, I can actually reassign it to a different group here as well. Some people rather do it more from a kind of a list pick and a drop down versus dragging the tiles. So we did create it. You could do that either way. I can also, over on the right, I have the ability to select different balances that I see. And those balances are going to be, when you first log in, what does that end up showing out there? So for example, if it was a loan, maybe I wanted to have current balance and available credit. Maybe I wanted to show what the interest paid was year to date plus current balance. Maybe I wanted to see, current balance plus float. So again, all I got to do is basically go ahead and select and figure out what balances I want to do on that particular piece of it. You'll notice it only lets me do 2. So as soon as I select those other ones are now grayed out. If I uncheck one of those, it allows me to go ahead and pick another one for me to be able to go ahead and see. So if I go back then to my home page, okay, what you're going to end up seeing for this particular account, rather than available balance, it's actually going to show now what the float is. So the default was showing current balance and available balance. This particular account, I've elected to say, hey, I want to show what current balance and any applicable float. Go real quick back into settings and account preferences. Again, I can select by or do a search by nickname, product type, group number, or labels. So again, as soon as I start typing in, it's going to go ahead and it's going to look for those particular groupings. Bad example because I have everything out there with a CK in there. But for example, if I start typing in payroll, it's going to go ahead and limit that down to either my payroll account, or you can see I've got some groupings out there for accounts payable account. That's why I went ahead and narrowed down that search for me. All right, we'll go back to the home screen here, and we'll go into a couple of other items that we'll show you here. I think the next thing we'll do is we'll kind of go back into some of the different payments that we have and show you how those would work. And I'm going to start with kind of going through doing a simple, ACH type of a payment. Again, I highlight ACH payment. I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and then I'm going to go ahead and do a new payment. In this case, I'm going to do an ACH credit batch. A couple of things that it's going to come up here and ask me to do is what are my standard entry classes. Again, usually it's going to be a PPD or CCD type of and again, more standard entry classes. These are the NACHA standard entry classes. Company entry description. Again, just go ahead and fill that out. One of the things you're going to see is, if you do have multiple subsidiaries, it'll tell you what subsidiary, it's going to be, the payment's going to be coming from. In this particular case, I only have one, so it's just going to be this advisory corp. Then I can, just like I did in the multiple accounts transfer, same way in the ACH credit batch, which one of those accounts do I actually want to go from. In this case, I'm going to maybe do this balance. I can then go ahead and put what my effective date's going to be. Again, keeping in mind as I'm creating this ACH batch, I can put that effective date out there in the future. Maybe I want that effective date to be coming up here on the 8th. I can actually set a reoccurrence on this particular batch as well. And if you look, it could be first of the month, could be the 1st and the 15th of the month. If you're doing something, maybe it's like a payroll, I can do it quarterly. Maybe it's something, excuse me, with taxes. Could be something that's every other week. Additionally, I can actually click on when this should stop. So again, maybe I'm going to do it monthly for a year, or maybe I do it, forever until I canceled it. In this particular example, I'm going to walk through and not do a reoccurring one, but just wanted everyone to see that I do have that capability to do a reoccurring payment. From here, then I can figure out, okay, where does that need to go to? I can either type in for the system to find recipients, okay? In this particular case, I don't have any recipients out there, so what I'm going to do is I can click on Add Recipients. If I had some of those already put in that particular for the ACH credit batch, it would actually go out there and find those. Again, I can go down here and I can actually select on the recipient. I guess I did have one here in this particular case. I can go ahead and put in what my dollar amount is going to be. Or I can actually add multiple recipients as well. So in this particular case, if I clicked on Add Multiple Recipients, okay, it would go ahead and bring me up this list. Visualize for a second if this list was larger, right? I could actually put in and do my search function there as well. So a couple different ways to do the same function on that ACH payment, if you will. From here, if I want to, I can go ahead and expand those rows, and I can put some addendum information in there. Again, this is just basically more information that's going to end up then being passed on to that ACH transaction. So I'm going to do a test ACH message. I can either approve or draft depending on what my security levels are. In this particular case, I'm just going to go ahead and draft that transaction. And you're going to see that the payment's going to be processed. You're going to now see a little bit different view on this message that came up than what we've seen when we did the multiple transfers. In this particular case, it's going to come up and it's going to say, you know what, the transaction was drafted, but it actually requires an approval. So again, think about potentially having like a payroll clerk, but then a payroll admin that has to go ahead and approve it. Or quite honestly, it could be a payroll clerk, but we have to have another payroll clerk with the same role but a different user actually go and approve, basically having that dual validation before the transaction would go out. I can close and come back and do those all at once, and I'll show you how to do that in Activity Center. Or if this is a transaction I want to make sure it gets out right away, I can go view in Activity Center. Depending on what my rights are, I could either approve it or make sure that it does get assigned. Okay, for my particular case here, I'm actually going to go ahead and just close that message out. Similar to what we did before, I do have the ability to go ahead and create a template. And again, what kind of a template am I going to do? Is it going to be an ACH credit batch or a collection? In this case, let's go ahead and just do an ACH credit batch. Template name. And my template name, again, make sure this is a little bit more descriptive than what I'm showing you. I'm just going to call it test. I think we'll call it test 4 for today. Same thing. I've got to choose my standard entry classes, company entry description, from and through account numbers. And you're also going to notice anything that was required that I didn't select correctly, it will at least let me know that an error on it. Again, I can search for my different recipients, or I can do a new recipient as well. So again, if I don't have a recipient, if it's a new one-time one, I can actually go in and add the recipient. So this will be my display name. This email address, that is optional. If I put it in there, I can basically send email notifications that'll go out to that recipient. Basically, it said, hey, we're getting ready to send payment or credit, whatever the case is. This is where I can then put in the checking account. Okay, it could be a savings, could be a loan. Obviously, what that account number is. And then this is kind of a neat feature here as well. Let's say that you happen to know what the financial institution name is, but you don't have the actual routing number. So as I start typing, it's going to now bring up the names of those particular FIs. So in my case, I'm just doing, I started typing in Austin, so it's going to give me a list of the different financial institutions that have Austin in the name of the institution. In this case, let's say I'm going to do Austin Bank, Texas. You're going to end up seeing what ends up happening is it now automatically filled in that ACH routing number for me. I can go ahead and click on Save to basically save that information. And then I have additional details I can add for that recipient as well. And again, once again, like I said, it will error. Obviously, when I was going through this example, I didn't add in that account number, so I'd have to go back in again, add in what that account number was that I was looking to go ahead and put that information into for. So I'll go ahead and just fill this out real quick with this kind of some dummy data, just give you guys an example of what that's going to look like. Again, the email address is optional. Got my checking account number there. Got my ACH name. I think I'm missing my account number here. I'll go ahead and save that. Well, let me cancel out of that, and I'll go back in here real quick and enter that information in. From this point, then, what I can do is I can actually go ahead and save that recipient. Once I save that recipient, okay, now you'll be able to see that in the drop-down. You would actually be able to see that test for. In this particular case, I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of that. I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of those other options. So again, I can either cancel or I can go back and lose those changes. In this case, I'm going to do cancel and lose those changes. But kind of just to reiterate, when I go ahead and do that new payment, right, I can either just click on new payment, add it. I can actually do it from a template, right, or I can actually create my template. It's real similar to what we did in the multiple transfers as well. Again, anytime I click on it, I can either pay it from that template, I can edit it, I can copy it, or I can actually go through and delete that. I'm going to talk a little bit now about processing ACH pass-through. So this would be where a file has been created from like a payroll software or some other third-party software where it's already in the standard Nacha ACH file format. What I can do is I can basically select the file to upload. I'm just going to go out and browse out to where that file is. From there, I'm going to put in what my process date. One key thing to remember about this process date, okay, your ACH file should already have the effective date. So this is the date I actually want that file to be processed. So for example, I could go ahead and process it tomorrow on August 7th. But we're going to actually get the effective dates from what's already in the Nacha file. We're not going to override any of those. And then basically from there, just go ahead and if I wanted to put a memo as it relates to that particular pass-through component, I can. Keeping in mind all of your individual line item memos and stuff, that's going to be coming through from that ACH file that's already out there. I do not have an ACH pass-through here that I really want to run through the test system, but you can see once I've done that and selected it, browsed out to it, I can do a draft and approve. That draft and approve is going to kind of depend on what security you had set up. So again, if I'm doing the dual validation, I could have one individual draft it. I could have one individual go ahead and actually then approve that file. I did want to go back and show you one thing I forgot to show you here. I'm going to go back to the ACH payments as well. If you don't have a standard Notcha file, we do allow you to create a file. And what I can do is I can do this upload from file. Okay. And what we've created is basically a sample CSV file that can then be loaded. So I'm going to pull up that sample CSV file just so you guys have a chance to look at that. It's going to be fairly simple and straightforward. Generally speaking, I find most people have a system that can create that standard Notcha file. But if you don't, basically this allows me to create allows me to create that file. I can call, the name of it. I basically got the RT numbers, the account number, one indicating a checking account, two a savings, and then the dollar amount. I'm going to see here, I think I might have a sample file that we can go out and look at here real quick. Bear with me as I kind of, I'm going to bring that particular file. Yeah, I think I've got a sample payroll file here. And again, I just called it payroll, but this would actually be an ACH batch that I'm doing. You'll notice that I can save those recipients, and then I can upload the file. So if you think about this, if it's not a standard Notcha file that we're doing the pass-through, and I actually want to save these recipients, the system will allow us to go ahead and do that. Watch what happens when I click on Save Recipients here. Okay. It's going to give me basically a message that either did it successfully, or in this case it says, hey, you need to look at this because these two already exist. I've obviously done a couple of different sessions here, so using that same file, those recipients actually existed. The nice thing is the system does have an edit check, and with that edit check, it's not going to allow you to continually upload and have, recipient XYZ out there multiple times. So I'm going to go ahead and click X out of that. I can then go ahead and do an upload of that file. Okay, and you're going to notice what ends up happening is it basically then brought that in. There's still some key information I'm going to have to enter, right? Because keeping in mind it was an upload, but it doesn't have all the information that we need to create a true Notcha formatted file. So again, I'm going to select my standard entry class code. I'm going to put any kind of a description that I want in there. I'm going to have to tell it which account, in this case, it's a payroll type of a file, so I'm going to have to tell it what account. And again, I can go ahead and do a search on that, or I can just go ahead and do my drop down and scroll down to whichever account I want. You're going to notice if I had multiple subsidiaries, I could look at that. I can then go ahead and also look at what effective date I want to put on this. At this point, I can either go ahead and draft this, or I can go ahead and approve it based off of, again, what my security is. And you're going to see total amount, $35. I've got two different recipients. Okay. In this particular case, I'm going to go ahead and just do a draft on it. And it's going to come back with that warning that basically says, hey, you've got transactions that you need to approve. For right now, I'm going to go ahead and close that. Keep in mind, I could go look at those transactions directly as well. So I'm going to go back to my home screen here, and I'm going to pull up Activity Center. You guys have heard me mention that a couple of different times, so let's go into Activity Center. Again, single transactions, and I have reoccurring transactions. In this particular case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, hey, look at everything that we've done for today. And you can see the status they're in. So you can see the ACH that we did from the file, that $35 that's out there in a status of drafted. If I click on this, I can then go ahead and approve it. I could actually go ahead and do an inquire. So if I go ahead and I select on an inquire, right, it's going to give me additional details. It's going to say who requested it, when was it requested, what's the product it's coming out of, what's the account number that it's coming out of. I could even send a message as well if I wanted to on this particular transaction. I I can create and upload some attachments as well. So if I'm going through, I don't want to approve this transaction because I have some more questions on it, the inquire is one of the ones that I can do. And you can see once that happens, I can start back and it'll keep that track of that conversation. I'm going to go back into Activity Center here. Okay. You can see this. I can also do a print details. On this one, I'm actually going to go ahead and approve that penny transaction. And it's going to say one more time, are you sure you want to approve this transaction? I'm going to go ahead and confirm it. Okay. And again, it's going to come back and it's going to say, hey, please enter the token. And again, this goes back to what your security and your protocol processes are, whether or not you require an actual token to validate that transaction. In this case, for our test purposes, I'm just going to go ahead and cancel that out. But I wanted you guys to be aware there's some different options that we can do on there. Additionally, you may not have as simple a business as I do here in this test. So I have the ability to filter on, right, and select what type of transaction that I'm looking for. I can further narrow it down by the status. So, for example, maybe I want to look at any ACH credit batch. Maybe I want to say, is it same day? Is it non-same day? Maybe the status. Maybe I only want to look at those that are in a drafted status. Maybe I want to look at those that are drafted status that's out of a specific account. Or maybe I only look at those that are created by a certain user. In this case, obviously, you're going to see it says advisory. I can also do a different date range. As soon as I go ahead and hit apply on that particular piece of it, it's going to go back and it's going to change the transaction that I'm seeing. Okay, so now basically, where before you might have noticed I had, 10, 12 different transactions. Now I'm down to just 3 because of how I limited that down in doing the search. Reoccurring transactions, again, important to remember this, that there's a single transaction and a reoccurring, right? Same criteria apply. We just broke out those transactions so that you can see those ahead of time. I'm now going to go back to my home here, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to double check to see if we've had any questions come through, because I know I covered a lot of this prior to jumping into the next sections here. All right, I'm double checking here. Right now, as of this time, I don't see any questions that have come through on the chat perspective. If there are some that I missed, I apologize for that. We will definitely make sure we get those addressed, though, as we go through this piece of it. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to move into a couple different pieces on how we go ahead and create users, how we manage users. So bear with me here a second. I will skip over to that piece of our training here today. Okay, so I'm going to go back under settings. Okay, and this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about users and user roles. And we're actually going to start with user roles here. What this allows you to do, it allows you to identify different roles. So rather than having to set up security for, maybe 50 different employees, or even 10 or 200, whatever your number might be, what I can now do is I can actually establish roles. And we'll walk through kind of how those roles work and how to think about them. But if you look at a role, think about it maybe in the terms of payables. Again, I may have a payable clerk. role, there may be multiple different users in that. So maybe that's Chris and Whitney are in that particular role. Then I may have a payable admin. On that payable admin, maybe that is going to be Jerry and Sally. Maybe at a higher level, I've got, a VP. I think you kind of get the idea there of the different ways to think about that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a couple of different ways to look at this. I can obviously search by user roles. Same way as anything else, I start typing, it's going to show me what I have available. Again, in my environment today, I've only got 2 roles, so there's really no reason to do a search because they're all going to show up right there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I can edit those roles, right? I can actually copy that. What's nice about the copy is if I've got 1 or 2 things that I may want to change, think in terms of maybe limits, or maybe I want to have a payable role that has access to wires and one that doesn't, but everything else remains the same. Rather than creating that from scratch, you can actually copy an existing one. Once that's created, go in and just make any modifications that you need to off of it. We do have the ability then as well. There's some templates kind of out of the box. So again, as you're going through and you're looking to set up your first new user role, not that you have to use these, but you do have some templates out there. And the templates kind of give a description of what the role has access to out of the box, keeping in mind as you created it, right? I'd click on this and create it using it. You have the ability to change and edit every one of those particular people. Okay. For today, I'm going to go ahead and basically edit an existing one that I have out there and walk you through it that way. So one of the components that's going to allow you to do in that user role, it's going to allow that user role to come up and say, okay, which accounts do I have access to? And once I have access to it, what can I do? Can I view it? Can I make deposits to it? Can I make withdrawals to it? Can I end up changing the labels on those? Okay. And again, this is going to be more of an admin that will have ability to set up and change these roles, right? But you can see I can basically just click on the different check marks and stuff. And if you think about it, especially like on a payroll account, that's going to be important for the role to decide whether or not it's just view, deposit, or make those withdrawals on those particular things. Anytime I make a change, I can then either do a save, or if I want to look at it, I can go ahead and do a deletion piece of that. In the overview component of that as well, it's going to show you what types of transactions that they have access to or ability to look at. Anything that is not allowed is going to have a line through it. So, for example, in my particular example, domestic wires they don't have access to. It could be, ACH payments, or it could be ACH pass-throughs, or maybe we don't allow them to do debit collections. In my example here, I'm going to select on ACH payments. Okay. If I wanted to, I could go ahead and click Disabled. Go ahead and then click Save. As I click Save, it's going to show you that that policy has been changed. Okay. Now, if I go back out to my overview, okay, you're going to see that those ACH payments no longer are allowed. Now, in my example, I'm going to turn that back on, but I just kind of wanted to show you how you have the ability to enable or disable those. And again, this is by user role. So in my particular case, this is the training payable role. For my admin role, or for my payable admin role, my VP role, whatever roles I might have out there, it doesn't apply. I'm only making changes to this specific role. Any user, right, tied to this particular role, and I could have an unlimited number of users tied to this particular role, are going to inherit all of the rights or restrictions. So in this case, I'm going to go back and I'm going to actually enable that. I'm going to show you just a couple of quick things within here. In the operations, right, this is where you heard me talk a little bit about what you have rights to. excuse me, I could potentially say that I want them to be able to draft, but maybe I don't want this particular role to be able to make any approval of transactions, or maybe I don't want them to cancel any transactions. So you have the ability for each one of these actions to turn them on or off. Additionally, I can say what is the maximum amount of this particular role. And if you think about it, that maximum amount is going to apply to stuff like whether or not they can draft over a certain dollar amount, whether they can go ahead and approve over a certain dollar amount. In this case, let's just use $100 here. Okay, again, anytime throughout this, I can go ahead and click OK. And now you're going to see that I can do any operation. So I can draft a transaction, I can approve a transaction, I can cancel a transaction, but only up to $100. Additionally, if I had multiple subsidiaries, I could say in this particular role, right, what are my subsidiaries that they can do these type of transactions? Is it subsidiary A, B, C, D, all of the above? I can even limit it by accounts. So in this particular case, watch what happens. If I do my grouping, I can actually select accounts payable, and it's going to automatically select these two accounts and say any payable account out there you have access to do. If I uncheck it, then I can go through and I can check these by individual accounts. Draft hours, some organizations like to use this, some don't, but really what this is allowing me to do is allowing me to say, you know what, normal business hours for me are going to be, 7 a.m. to maybe 5 p.m. Anything outside of that, in this case, what I do is I basically select which ones I wanted to have, and you're not going to be able to draft, approve, or create transactions outside of those normal business hours. Some organizations, quite honestly, don't restrict that and will leave that open. And then, what standard entry classes can they do? And again, this all goes back to that specific role. It's not for that user. It's for any specific user tied to that role. I'm going to go ahead, in this case, I'm going to go ahead and click, actually let's do this. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. What the system allows you to do then, it allows you to test the policy that you set up. So what I'm going to basically do is I'm going to say I'm going to draft, and I can change this, right? In my case, I'm going to say I'm going to draft $1,000. Here's my checking account. Here's my subsidiary. Here's my standard entry class. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and test this. Okay. And you're going to know a couple things happened. The bank policy allowed this. Again, the company policy went ahead and allowed this. So again, in this case, it's going to be, advisory corp, but the user role was denied. And the first thing you're going to see the user role was denied on was the amount, right? I had authorization to draft it. Okay, so we were good there. But my dollar threshold was set at 100. So as soon as I try to do a $1,000 amount there, it's automatically going to come back and it's going to say, you're over this, you can't do it. And what's nice about this is it allows you to kind of do some testing ahead of time. Now, the end user would not actually see this particular component of it. They would just be saying, hey, you know what, denied the transaction based off of amount. They wouldn't actually see what the limits were. And I can't type there. I wanted to put $10. Okay, so I changed that amount to $10. I'm going to go back and I'm going to click my test. It's going to go back through the same thing. And now what you're going to see is it said, yep, this transaction would be allowed, right, because it's now under my dollar threshold. I didn't restrict it to any subsidiary. The account that it was making out of was one of my approved accounts, and my draft hours were set up for unlimited, and I selected the correct SEC code. So that kind of gives you an idea of how you can set up and leverage those different user roles. In my particular case, I'm going to go ahead and delete that piece of it. I'm not going to go ahead and, whoops, I don't want to delete the user role. Sorry about that. I'm going to go ahead and make those changes that I went in there and saved, but then those will now apply to that entire user role. Okay, if I went in and looked at advisory, I'm just going to show you this real quick. You're going to notice my ACH payments, right, have completely different approval limits because that, again, is a different user role than the payables training that I was setting up. From here, I can actually then go into users. I can set up a new user. And again, I'm going to have to put some information in there, first name, last name. You know, again, it's going to ask for some different login ID, password. Keeping in mind this password, and what I like about this is over on the right, it's going to show you what some of your constraints are. So, for example, the password must contain a minimum of 1 lowercase, it must have 1 uppercase, and it must have 1 special character. So whatever your policy is, it's actually going to show you. So as you're setting up that temporary password, keeping in mind the first time that new user logs in, and they're going to be prompted to change it. But the big piece I wanted to show you now is that user role. As soon as I assign them the user role, all the different limits, all the different functions, whether they can do it or not, I don't have to set this up for Beth, my new employee. All I had to do is tie her to that user role. She now inherits all of those rights and or restrictions. If it happens to be a role that doesn't exist, then obviously you would have had to set up the new role first. But most companies I see, you know, kind of create roles based off the function and not a one-for-one. All right. Last piece I want to show a little bit about is reporting. I think this is going to be a little bit of a new feature that you are going to have available to you. We won't go into a ton of detail on this, but I think it's something that maybe a few of you have requested, and you'll now have the capability to go ahead and do that. So I can create different reports out there. You can see I've got an ACH activity report. I might have a transaction report, a company user activity report. And what reports I have access to, again, is going to be a little bit dependent upon my role. I can actually go in and create new reports as well. I'm going to go ahead and click on this. I can view the history of the report. I can run the report right now, or I can actually edit the report. So again, if I click edit on the report, you know, perhaps I want to change the name. There's some things I can do by changing the file formats that I have. I can look at actually creating this as scheduled. And again, I can do it daily, weekly, monthly. I can click run now. If I run that now, it'll go ahead and actually kick that off. Oh, I skipped over one. I can actually make a report private or shared. When I do a report private, that's going to be just for my user ID. As soon as I make it shared, it's actually going to then be a report that's going to be available for anybody that has my user role. So as you're thinking about that, just because I create a report as shared, and maybe I'm at the VP level and it's on a specific account that not a lot of people have access to, it's only going to show with those with a VP role. Nobody outside of that role would be able to see those different reports. So I'm going to go back to the report here real quick, and I'm going to actually create a new report. And you're going to notice I can do current day or I can do previous day. Current day is exactly like what it said. It's basically going to look at any activity that was done from, let's say, 7 o'clock this morning to 3:05 today. The previous day, it's going to go back and look at that different time period. I can collect, transaction reports as well. Okay, and again, I got to give these guys report names. You'll want to be fairly descriptive. Maybe I'm going to call this test tran report. If it was off a specific account, you might want to say, test tran report XYZ. Okay, and again, I could select these companies off of, as soon as I select company A, it's going to go ahead and automatically select any company A accounts I have out there. If you remember, I can also had a company B, company C, those type of things. I can actually click accounts payable. So any of my accounts payable, in this case, it's going to automatically include these 3 accounts in that particular grouping. I can do a select all, or I can deselect all. In this case, I'll go ahead and deselect all. And then if I click just one particular account, it's going to go ahead and run the report for just that account, or I can, click multiple different accounts if I want to. So different ways to create that report as you're going through with that. On the TRAN report, I kind of recommend doing this where we're actually going to select on, some specific dates. So I can say last business day. I can say last week, last month. In this case, I'll go ahead and select the last month. Actually, I think for this one to run, I'm going to do the last 30 days, just because I don't have a ton of transactions going through this. I can schedule this. I can say, hey, I never want this scheduled. It's just a report I want out there. I'm going to run it when I need to. I can do it daily. I can do it every business day, right? Keeping in mind, if I did this daily, the last 30 days of trans, not a whole lot's going to change. The only thing that's going to change is the last business day. I can go ahead and do a save, or I can go ahead and do a save and run on that. So for this case, we'll go ahead and do a save and run. We'll see if we have any transactions out there. Okay, it's going to go ahead and pull up that report. A little bit of an eye chart here. Let me try to blow this up here for you guys. But you're going to see it's going to give me a list of here's what my transactions were, when they were ran through, who approved them, have they been processed, are they just in draft, different statuses there. Like I said, I think as you kind of play around with that, a lot of times you'll find some good uses for that, but I just did a very simple one to show you here and as part of this example. All right, I'm going to go ahead at this point and I'm going to go stop sharing my screen here. I'll go back and open this up to see if there are any additional questions here. Take me just a second and I will unmute everybody. All right, hopefully everybody is now unmuted. Did anybody have any questions we want to bring up? I see it looks like there's a couple that went through chat, but any questions? Okay, I did have one question from Whitney that came up through this. One of the pieces that she wanted to talk about, you will have a link out there that will take you to your different positive pay and your remote deposit components of those. And those will actually be set up under your different settings pieces of it. And again, what will end up happening is that link will just go right off and you'll be able to access your positive pay or your remote deposit pieces of that. So Whitney, appreciate you bringing that up to me. Okay, if there's no other questions, I really appreciate everybody joining here. If you do think of something later, feel free to reach out to Whitney, James, or myself, and we can get those questions answered for you. Appreciate everybody joining today.